couple of housekeeping items. Please make sure in your bio it has your name and your district and your school affiliation, so we can have that information for your for CEUs. And if you want to go ahead and put that in the chat, you can do that as well, so we have record of that. So, but everybody, please put in the chat your name, school affiliation, your district, and also if you are a certified AEMA member or not. Put that information in there for us. That helps us with deciphering CEU stuff. So please make sure you put in there if you're certified or not. With that being said, we'll get started. Josh Meyer is not going to be able to be on the call with us today. He had some personal stuff he had to deal with, but I want to thank Josh and USG's help with putting on these workshops. They help us out tremendously. Josh takes care of all the administrative stuff and the record keeping that makes the CEU stuff on our end a whole lot easier. So if you ever talk to Josh, thank him for what he does to help put these workshops on. He's a huge help. With that being said, excited to see right now we currently have 33 people on this call. I think that's awesome. Talk about track and field uniform distribution, inventory, and footwear. I think I speak for myself. Many of us on this call have worked track and field before. It is a unique and different animal to tackle when it comes to equipment. I think we have a pretty solid group of panelists on here today to kind of discuss how they do things with their sport, with track and field, with a lot of different experiences and backgrounds. So we have Daniel Schmidt at the University of Wyoming, Mark Malcolm at the University of Michigan, Melinda Easley at Colorado State, and Kayla, I don't want to mess up your last name, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a minute, but Kayla at TCU. So grateful for all four of them to be on here today. And before we jump into the topic questions, we'll just kind of let them introduce themselves and kind of give their background, how they got to where they're at in their career and their experience with track and field. So Kayla, will get it started with you.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm Kayla. My last name is pronounced Modal, so no worries about that. It's pretty hard to pronounce. Currently working with TCU. I have swim and dive and soccer currently, but I came from East Carolina University where I had 9 sports, which included track and field. That was one of my bigger beasts that I had over there. Obviously, it's a bigger sport with more athletes. Came from Miami as a GA and then just kind of got sucked into the business. So that's how I got here. Do you want me to keep going about track, or do you want to introduce everybody?
Let everybody introduce themselves first. Okay. Melinda, you go ahead. Melinda, I don't know if you're muted or what. I'm having audio issues, hard time hearing you. While she's trying to get that sorted out, we'll kick it over to Daniel.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
I'm Daniel Schmidt. I'm at the University of Wyoming, currently assistant with football. My background was at Mississippi State, where I was director of operations for track and field for 5 years. Sorry if my audio is crazy. I'm currently outside the University of Arizona's football stadium on a site visit for our bowl game. But I grew up in the sport of track and field. My father was a Division I coach for a long time in a couple of different places. So I kind of fell into it that way. But I did handle their equipment as a student manager all the way up through full time. So I probably have about 10 years of experience with track equipment.
Mark, you can go ahead.
How's it going, everyone? Mark, I'm at University of Michigan now. I've been bounced around a little bit. I was at Bowling Green State University to start in the MAC. I had minimal interaction with track, but I did deal with the ins and outs there a little bit. And then I moved on to Northwestern. I see a couple Northwestern people on here. I missed my time there, missed them. I did have cross country while I was there, so that's where I really got into the nitty gritty of the track and field stuff. And then when I moved over to Michigan, they're my main priority. So I have track and field here for the last 2 years. So we'll get into the nitty gritty later.
Linda, you been able to reconnect yet? Don't think she's been able to reconnect. We'll go ahead and jump into it, and I'll ask the first question and let Kayla, Daniel, and Mark kind of take it from there. So first question is kind of, what is your processes of inventorying, distributing, retrieving track and field uniforms? Like what processes have you used in the past that you see has worked, hasn't worked? Kind of what do you do on a day-to-day basis to make sure you're getting everything issued out to the athletes and getting it returned?
I'll kick it off. At Mississippi State, I was definitely fortunate enough to have a sizable budget for track and field at a P5 level. Our Adidas contract was pretty substantial when it came to track and field. That also posed some other issues, but from a distribution standpoint, we were able to receive all of our inventory over the summer as it used to go before all the COVID distribution issues came about today's age. So it was definitely one of those situations where I found it easier to package everything in 2 different scenarios, one for practice related items and then one for travel related items. We utilized a locker system similar to most football programs with laundry issue. We were fortunate enough to have a situation like that, but that was kind of our main go-to.
I think Melinda's on the call now. So Melinda, if you want to introduce yourself and then answer this first question, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, okay. I have about 12 years of track and field experience. I started at UMKC in Kansas City. I moved out to Colorado at UNC in Greeley, and I'm currently at CSU. So I've worked with track and field in all those schools. Going into your question here, sorry, I'm catching up a little bit. Inventory, distributing. Are you talking about uniforms in general with this question?
You can go either way with it, but specifically when you are distributing your uniforms to your athletes, what process do you use to do that, and then retrieving it, making sure that you get everything back, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously times change. So currently we have helmet tracker. And so we tried the barcode system of heat pressing a barcode on the inside of the singlet and then trying to retrieve it. But the kids actually do their laundry themselves because we have a separate facility. Equipment room is separate from their workout facility. And so a lot of those tags came off. They didn't adhere and hold to the material like I had hoped. So basically what I do is I just record it. I record who got what compression, loose, what color. And when we retrieve it at the end of the year, I have a check sheet. And so I know what I issued them and they have a turn-in bag. I check it in as soon as they come to the window, retrieve it, check them off. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have the facility that allows me to give them a cubby so that they get the same uniform back every year. So it kind of goes back into a bulk inventory. And we just kind of repeat the cycle, weed out the singlets that look disgusting, and then reorder what we need to replace those items. And kind of just piggybacking off of that, as far as issuing, I do a cross-country fall issue. They get everything right when they arrive, usually early August, end of July. I do a workout gear for my track team. So we don't actually give them competition gear, winter gear, or anything. They basically get t-shirts, shorts, workout shoes, and socks. And then I do another issue the 1st of December before indoor season starts. And then they get all their winter gear, they get their competition gear. And the reason that we do that is because we have a lot of kids that drop off, as you guys know, like there's walk-ons, there's ones that just don't quite make the team as we start in competition. So we don't even issue their gear until December. So I'm sorry, I can kind of go on here, so I'll let somebody else take the floor.
That was really good information, Melinda. Thank you for that. Kayla, you want to jump in?
Sure. At ECU, I kind of had a similar experience with Melinda, but I did have a facility that was right next to the track and right next to the locker room. So our athletes did have pass-throughs. I did end up heat pressing numbers into the bottoms of the jerseys right where the seam is. That way I noticed it didn't fall off as easily, because when I first got to ECU, a lot of our gold jerseys were really faded and discolored from the kids doing their laundry at home. So that was something that admin really wanted me to take care of and make sure like that we were doing the laundry, and that way we could preserve the jerseys a little bit better than the athletes do. College boys are not the greatest at turning their jerseys back in or doing the laundry correctly. So did have a couple of instances with like mold on jerseys and things like that. So we just kind of took it back, and I started issuing them per track meet. So every meet I would write down what number and what size everybody got, put them in their cubbies. And then as they came back off of the bus from the track meet, they would turn them back into me. Me and my students would check them off, make sure we got everything back. That way it just kind of helped us keep track of them. It was kind of tedious, obviously, doing it for like 60, 70 athletes, but I just found it worked a lot better than asking the athletes to be super responsible and know how to take care of their stuff.
So, Kayla, I have a follow-up question. That you said when they got back from the trip, they would turn it in right away, or did you have a deadline that they had to have it turned into you by? How did y'all do that per se?
Yeah, so most trips, they come back either like Sunday night or midday Sunday, depending on how far away the trip is, and if it's cross country or if it's like a field event, depending, usually they go later. They usually have about 24 hours from when they get off the bus to when I actually start checking them. So usually Monday afternoon, like late afternoon, like 4 or 5. We also had afternoon practices, so that helped a little bit too. We would go through the bin, because I always had a bin outside of my locker, or outside of my equipment room, and that's where they were supposed to turn them in. We'd go through and mark them off, and I would go up to them at practice and be like, hey, I don't have your jersey. Do you have it? And then I'd also send the list to all of the coaches, so they were aware of who had turned in their jerseys and who had. Obviously, I'm like the nice person that gives out the gear. So usually I had to let the coaches take control and kind of ask them to get them back a lot more often than not, but usually about 24 hours.
Awesome. Mark.
Yeah, I kind of waited to go last. This might be a long-worded response. So like I said, I have like brief knowledge at 3 different stops, and I kind of did it a little different at every stop. And I think they all kind of incorporated into how I do it now a little bit. So when I was at Bowling Green, I didn't really deal with them day to day, but I did handle a lot of their uniform pickups and collections. So what we did at Bowling Green was everybody's stuff was put on a loop and put on a shelf. And they would come, they would tell me what their number was. I would give them their whole loop. We didn't necessarily inventory what was on the loop. So then they would take the loop and they would go to the meet, and then they would have a turn in time. And it was usually like a 4-hour window. They would come, they'd give me their loop. I'd check them off the thing. We'd wash the loop. We'd put the loop back up on the shelf until the next meet. That seemed to work okay, but a lot of times they say, oh, this wasn't on my loop. And it's like, well, we're not going on your loop. We're not taking anything off your loop. So you must have it still somewhere. So, I mean, the coaches at Bowling Green were fine with that. They understood like the loop doesn't really come out open. If it does, all the stuff is going to be off the loop, not one item. So it worked out fine there. At my time at Northwestern, we had pass-through cubbies. So kind of like Kayla, we numbered their uniforms with heat press tags and coordinate that with their lockers. So what we do is we would put it out weekly for the meets, and then they would turn in as they would with a laundry chute with game specific stuff. So they would turn that in over the course of Sunday, Monday. I would do it Monday night, inventory it Tuesday on a sheet, and then I would tell the coaches, hey, this is what I have. This is who didn't turn in specifically what. And they said, okay, we'll tell them to turn it in. If I didn't get it Wednesday or Thursday and stuff was going out Thursday or Friday, they didn't get that piece of uniform. And it never really became a problem there, because if they didn't turn in buns, they had their buns then. So that's how we did it at Northwestern. So when I first got to Michigan, I got here in the middle of cross country season. So I operated on what they kind of were doing. And that was, we would issue out to the locker room every meet, and then they would have to turn in by Monday at noon. So then I would go through, try to wash everything Monday, and then I would try to inventory the sheet. Well, what happened with that is I wasn't getting everything back. And then I would go to the coaches and I would say, hey, these are what I'm missing. And they would say, okay, let me check with the athlete. They talk to the athlete. They say, oh, the athlete said it turned it in. Okay, well, I don't have it, and I don't have a reason for saying I don't. So here we are without uniforms. So then we switched it. And now I have built out cubbies for every athlete. And I kind of treat it almost like a football schedule. So if they leave on Friday, they come on Thursday. I sit at the window. I have my sheet of all the athletes that are competing. I go to the window and it's like a pre-recorded response. Here's your top, here's your shorts, here's your warm-up quarter zip, here's your travel jacket, here's your rain jacket, here's your rain pants. Okay, you got everything, please sign here. So they sign it out and I say, okay, turn in for uniforms will be on Monday. So then I come and I have a whole Excel with every athlete that competed, exactly what items they took or didn't take. And then we go one by one per item on the turn in, and I highlight it. And if they don't have something, they sign and say, I don't have quarter zip. And then if they return the quarter zip, we cross that out, we update the sheet, and I update the coaches. And it's worked out, but it is a cumbersome task.
Thank you all for sharing. And I want to add on to Mark's there. It's actually been very impressive watching Mark's process, how he handles track and field uniforms and equipment here. We had 4 different equipment managers handle track and field in about a 30-month time frame. I did it for about 3 months on two different stints, and I say I was the track and field equipment manager. Daniel Schmidt actually was the Michigan track and field equipment manager, because I called Daniel pretty much every day, asking Daniel questions, picking his brain. But we had a lot of turnover there, and there was a lot of very unorganized processes in place, and the athletes were not very accountable. And one thing Mark didn't say, he passes out about total for one track meet, about 10 pieces of clothing per athlete. Multiple singlets, multiple bottoms, multiple travel suits. So 10 to 12 pieces per athlete. And I've seen Mark develop a relationship with the coaches to help hold those athletes accountable. And I try not to laugh the day that the first time Mark turned in a couple of names to the coaches, tell him that he had not returned stuff, and the coaches held him out for practice that day. And the athletes were not too happy with Mark that they weren't getting to practice. So it was kind of funny to watch. But it's been very impressive watching Mark's organization and putting that process down to pretty much a science. Like he said, it's cumbersome and tedious, but he doesn't make many mistakes with it. And it was very, very cool to listen to all 4 of you talk about your different processes that you've used. Kind of switching to the next topic, footwear. Obviously, numerous amounts of different styles and color schemes and fits for track and field footwear. We'll start off with Melinda. What is your process that you use when it comes to ordering and distributing your track and field spikes?
Well, we're a little kind of unique. We are exclusive with Under Armour, but I don't know if anybody on this call works with Under Armour product, but it's terrible. They're growing and they're getting a little better. But as far as our athletes, they don't really want to wear an Under Armour shoe. We have about half the team in Under Armour, half of them in another product. And so ordering with them, it's a little more difficult because I stock my shelf with an array of sizes in each style for jumps, sprints, throws. Throwers are usually good. They have a good shoe. I'm pretty happy with that. The jumps are getting a little better. The sprint, nobody really likes it on my end. So yeah, as far as the Under Armour pieces, I just stock what I need in an array of different sizes. It seems like with Under Armour, they haven't really changed much. They brought out maybe a couple more new shoes, but I don't know that there's a huge difference in what I have on the shelf versus what's coming out. And then I go through Running Warehouse to get my other spikes and things that I need, and my cross-country shoes. Right now, I can't even use a cross-country shoe with Under Armour. So we do a lot of ordering through Running Warehouse with that, and we start a stock in the like probably around August. And then I replenish again. I do another order in December. And stock seems to be working out well for me. I haven't ran into trouble where, oh, it's December, they have nothing I need. I should have ordered it all in August. That's not been the case for me. And maybe I should knock on wood, but things have been working out. So.
Melinda, you and you may have hit on this. Do you sit down with your coaches or any of your athletes to discuss what specific footwear they want, or are you just doing it on your own?
So coaches reach out to me. I have a good relationship and excellent staff, and so they kind of get together, and I have one contact. I deal with one coach in track and field, and he takes care of all the equipment in their staff meetings. He gets all the information from them, and he puts it all together for me, makes my job really, really easy. And so basically, I get a list of who wants what spike, who wants what cross-country shoe. And then when the athlete has an issue with one, they'll actually come to my window and say, hey, this shoe's rubbing me. It's a small fit. Can we do something different? And then we play with some other styles that I have on the shelf. And then maybe I have to order them something different. But most of my information comes from the coaches, and then feedback just when I see the kids. Like I said, we're in two different facilities. So unfortunately, I only get to interact with them basically when I issue to them, because we don't retrieve any laundry loops or do any exchanges except for when they need a new product.
Understood. Thank you for sharing. Kayla, you want to tell us about your process for ordering and distributing spikes?
Yeah. So at East Carolina, we were Adidas, which if you had Adidas, that was a whole situation with them. Adidas really only had like two true like running shoes. So usually the cross country kids were in one of the two running shoes that they provided that had more support. I would talk to the athletic trainers because Adidas did make a stability shoe. So then I would talk to them about what athletes need to be in what stability shoe and things like that, depending on the feet issues they were having. Spikes in itself was interesting. They, I think, moved away from having two different levels of sprint spike. They did at one point have like a professional sprint spike and then a collegiate one, which my coaches were like, well, we want the professional one because that's going to make them 0.2 seconds faster. So I had to order those for the people that we knew were going to be a little bit more competitive. Those were probably like $80 more expensive than the others. Otherwise, everybody else just had like one option for spikes. And I would talk to the athletes about sizing and things. Obviously, sizing wasn't always perfect, so I did have to order extras for that. And then Adidas is really hard to get spikes after forecasting. They usually sell out very fast because I don't know that they make a whole lot for like non-universities to buy. So I just had to pad my order a lot and kind of guesstimate, like, this athlete says she's an 8.5. She's probably like a 7.5 in the spike. And so I would kind of just have to know the athletes and then talk to them. the Adidas spikes also broke really easily. They would get a lot of holes in them, especially for my hurdlers. So I would also have to kind of like keep that in mind when I was ordering, that some people like to drag their foot. And so I would order extra in that. I think the biggest issue I had was Adidas stopped making throwing shoes past a 15 or 16, I believe. And I would end up I had a thrower that were an 18 and a half. So I would have to go to like an outside non-competitor throwing shoe for that, which they actually had. So that was my kind of experience with that. But
Thank you for sharing. Schmidt, you want to hop in here?
Yeah, so the way I always viewed it was footwear is the whole aspect of track and field. Obviously, there are other nuances when it comes to track and field equipment, but when it comes to footwear, there's not an event out there that doesn't touch it as a primary form of equipment. I would always bring in my freshmen, kind of like Madden Build a Player, where you come into the equipment room and it's, all right, let's get sized up. I worked a long time on building up inventory for footwear. So I think one of the things that we prided ourselves on was that we would never tell an athlete no when it came to footwear. Obviously, you make concessions in other areas, but as far as footwear goes, that's not really an option in the sport of track and field. You can't really just tell a person, especially like a distance runner who is running high mileage, that, hey, I know there's nothing left on the bottom of your shoe, but you're going to have to keep going in it. It was a very fluid process. I know a lot of equipment people are probably managing multiple sports, which makes it a far more daunting task to deal with a roster of between 60 and 120. But trying to get to know as many of your constant athletes as possible and figuring out like the subtle nuances of their performance, and especially like what Caleb was touching on with hurdlers, where they drag their feet and things like that. Jab throwers doing the same thing and developing holes in those shoes, and just trying to figure out, okay, I'm probably going to need 3 pairs of ring shoes for this discus thrower, but another one, probably 1 pair throughout an entire season, will be more than enough. It was just constant conversations like that. We had a lot of situations at Mississippi State where majority of the running that was being done was on concrete. So looking at the footwear options that Adidas had and making sure that it was more supportive, making sure that we had a variety of both stability shoes and lighter weight tempo shoes. And it was an area that I prided myself on. I mean, we would always try and order a full year in advance. Again, like Kayla touched on, once you get outside of that booking window, everything kind of becomes a lot more difficult. So talking with administration and really getting them to understand the nuances of ordering shoes, the rising cost of footwear prices, we were able to go in one specific year and do a all in, let's purchase as much footwear as possible and really build up that inventory, with the sole purpose of not handing it out for that specific year. But if we get out in front of this, then it becomes a forecasting for a year by year basis like any other normal program would. But it gives us the opportunity that whenever, I think most of the Adidas booking windows were for delivery around late December, early January, especially when it comes to performance spikes. So when you're dealing with that type of situation, well, from September all the way through December, your track specific kids are on the track and they're actually starting to get into workouts where they need their spikes. And so if you have a freshman who comes in, you already have that on the shelf from that big initial one-time purchase. So from a money standpoint and discussing it with administration, I feel like if you're in a situation where you're constantly having to fight the battle of having shoes on the shelf, that's an area where you could potentially go to them and show them the rising cost of footwear, which should not be difficult across any brand. It's just something that we as equipment and staffs are facing everywhere. So getting them to understand that and show them, hey, this is not something that we have to dole out on a year by year basis. But if we can find funds somewhere to really push for that initial one-time big purchase, it could definitely save you inventory issues in the long run, especially from a footwear standpoint.
Thanks for sharing, Daniel. And I remember you, we were both at Mississippi State, you going through that process of trying to get that one big purchase from those footwear, and it definitely helped you out in the long run. That was a very, very smart thing you did there. Mark, you want to jump in here and go through your process that you do with your coaches in ordering footwear?
Yeah, so going back to what Melinda said, when I was at Northwestern, we were Under Armour as well. And it was a hybrid between Under Armour and Asics. And a lot of it was mostly Asics training, even Asics spikes for training. And it was almost exclusively the Under Armour spike was just competitions. And then throughout the year, the coaches were a lot more on top of the footwear, and they would send me lists of who needs what and what shoe and when and things like that. And I would go ahead and put the orders in, and as they came in, I'd put them all straight to the cubbies. Here it's a little bit different. I meet with the track staff, two coaches that cover equipment here. I meet with them weekly to go over everything. That includes the big order, where we try to stock up on the booking order with event specific and training shoes, and obviously fill in the training shoes as needed. We do a pretty substantial order with the booking, but as we need in certain sizes on training stuff, that's a little easier to come by post booking. Last year was my first year here through the track and field, and originally they decided to go with what I'm going to call the 1B spike, which is still a very good spike, but it is not the Olympic level spike. Well, if you guys know, this new spike technology is like apparently the doping of track and field. So they saw the times these kids were putting up in this other spike. So now they wanted everybody in that spike. So I did my best. And I mean, it was literally hunting daily on game day for these spikes to come on. We got who we needed covered. But then when we met for booking again, I was like, we can't do that again. Like it's just not feasible. If that's the route we want to go, we need to order one for every athlete that's going to have it. So what we did is we went that route and we ordered everyone the top performance spike, but then we also ordered that 1B spike that they'll wear every day for training, for practice and stuff like that. So because the other thing was those elite performance spikes were having a big durability problem last year. So it was trying to keep those in stock and keep stock of them, kind of compounded both ways. So what we did this year is we got the everyday 1B training spike, and then I have a stock of the top performance spikes that I'll issue out once we get closer to the season on who they want to start breaking them in. And that's kind of how we go with the footwear stuff.
You kind of have an additional question I kind of want to add on to that topic based on what Mark just said, open to all four of you. When it comes to distance runners, cross country, their base training shoe, I would assume most coaches or athletes are tracking their mileage in those shoes, and at some point in the semester are ready for a new pair. What is your experience with that? Is that coming straight from the coach? Hey, it's time to give athlete X a new pair of training shoes. And when you're ordering for these distance athletes, how many pair of shoes are you ordering for each athlete in mind to get through the entire season?
I can go. I order mine 5 a year. They start out in the fall with 2. I give them 2 more in December, and then probably mid-spring I'll give them their last one, and it kind of closes out the season, gets them through a little bit of the summer, and so that's kind of how I do it.
So
go next. All right, go on, Kayla.
So that was actually one of my biggest issues that I had being track and field and cross country. I think it was my first or second year. I had to have like a sit down meeting with like the AD, the head coach, the cross country coach and be like, look, we need to figure the shoe situation out, because the mileage thing was interesting. I had some athletes that were running like 100 miles a week, and then I had other athletes who would run 100 miles every 3 weeks. And then like it didn't make sense for me to, as soon as one athlete needed a new pair, to give everybody a new pair. Because I would go into the locker room and there'd be like 3 new pairs of shoes just sitting there that nobody was ever using, and they're $200 shoes. Like, had to figure out a way to kind of make it make sense with a limited budget. Fortunately, we didn't have the budget to just hand out a new pair of shoes every month. So I had to sit down with the coaches, sit down with the athletes, and kind of talk to the athletes that are higher mileage, that are going to burn through their shoes a lot faster than some of the other kids that aren't going to do that. And then it just became a trust thing. Like, if my athlete comes up to me and is like, hey, I just ran like 400 miles, look at the bottom of my shoe, I'm like, here you go, here's your new shoe. And they would just do it based on need. I initially was only ordering around 3 a year, but we were trying to grow our cross country team a little bit more. So then I ended up ordering 5 to 7 pairs of shoes. And then they got 2 pairs of running flats as well. And the athletes would just come up to me and say, hey, like, I ran X amount of miles, here's your new shoe. And they would do it as needed. That way I wasn't giving out a shoe for every athlete every month or so.
So I would kind of focus on 5 a year for the higher mileage people. Obviously, when you get into like the jumps and the sprints areas that aren't necessarily putting as much into mileage, could drop some of that down to 3 a year. Ours would, being the fact that I was actually on the track staff, it made things a little bit more consistent for me, as I was a part of injury reports, a part of their training logs and things like that. So I could actually see what a specific athlete was doing from a mileage standpoint, if they were in the training room, if they were participating in practice. So there was a lot of situation where a distance runner wouldn't be putting in that type of mileage because they were injured and they were doing stuff on an underwater treadmill or things like that. So there's less chance of them to be breaking in the shoe and wearing it down. So it was more of a fluid conversation with me and my roster. So there were plenty of times more on the track side where I would have to go to the athlete and say, hey, I haven't seen you in 2 months or 3 months, so where are your shoes at? And then it would just be like a light bulb, like, oh yeah, I definitely need some new training shoes. But with the distance runners, that was definitely a fluid conversation. You definitely had some of the guys who were running 100-mile weeks, and then you had some that were more on the middle distance side where they were put in 40 to 60 a week, and then so stuff was always all over the place. And but going with the standard purchasing 5 a year for most distance kids, if they weren't able to use those 5 pair, that definitely helped with the buildup of future inventory as well.
Mark?
Yeah, so like I said, when I was at Northwestern, the coaches kind of monitored the mileage a lot more, and they kind of sent me a list. I would put the order through. They'd send me a list before they reached their mileage limits or whatever, and then I would get them all as soon as they came in. Here it's a little bit different. Like I said, we do a lot more in the booking. So we kind of target 4 to 5 for the distance athletes, and then 2 to 3 for sprints and jumps, and then we have a stockpile room of footwear. So for the men's distance guys, the coach more monitors that, and we kind of go in groups for their shoe distribution. And then for the women's distance, it's more of they kind of follow up as needed because their coach is a little different minded than the men's coaches. So there's 2 differences within the staff here on the men's and the women's distance. But kind of same thing with Daniel. We have a pretty good stockpile of shoes here, and we're fortunate enough to be able to book a pretty substantial order on footwear. So usually for the most part, we're okay. And if not, I can usually get training footwear as needed.
Daniel, I want to ask a more specific question to you. What would your advice be for someone that maybe doesn't have the budget for footwear, that a Michigan or Mississippi State has when it comes to focusing on those distance athletes and making sure you have what you need for them to perform at their highest level? What advice would you give when it comes to budgeting and trying to make sure you have a surplus of stock there?
It's just about making concessions in specific areas and finding out what is more useful to each athlete. I think anybody who ever deals with track and cross country on a consistent scale will understand that most distance runners are very in tune with what they're wearing. All of us can understand that different sports athletes are kind of a trend in themselves. Obviously, baseball players are going to wear chains and they're typically going to spit things. Football players are more rugged, and everybody has their own nuances. Track and field is no different from that. So if you have a distance runner who comes in and understands that, hey, I really like wearing Brooks, I'm going that route, or I really like Saucony, Asics, whatever it is, if they're going to go ahead and spend their own personal money on purchasing those types of training shoes because that's specifically what works for them, then that's something that you can account for in your budgeting. Obviously, that's not a perfect world and it's not a perfect solution, but understanding what your athletes are doing makes it a lot easier for you. Even at Mississippi State with a substantial budget where we could handle those things, you still had athletes at that level who I had one girl who only wore Hokas. She bought into the Hoka trend and she wanted to purchase her own training shoes. And as long as she had a pair of Adidas on at competitions, when the contract came into play, we let her do her own thing. So yes, I still had the budget to purchase for her, but if you're thinking about it from a cost saving standpoint, really, as long as you make sure you have one pair of shoes for that type of athlete, then you can make concessions in those areas. Figuring out what they need from other standpoints can allow that to help as well. I mean, if you're in an area where you don't need as many heavy layers of clothing, especially like in the South. I mean, yeah, you need t-shirts, but at the end of the day, you're not buying winter jackets. You're not buying all of these other articles of clothing, and you can shift that budget over to footwear. So it's definitely one of those areas that, again, everybody's seeing rising costs across all sports. Footwear is just becoming astronomically high, and making sure that you go to administration and really advocate for that area of your budget is going to be the most helpful. There's a lot of things to account for in other sports, but when you're talking about track and field, cross country, things of those nature, it's hard for an administrator to look at you and say, hey, footwear is not as important. It is the sport. I mean, yes, you have field event implements and things of that nature, but at the end of the day, footwear is just as important to track as a helmet is to football. So that's where you can really advocate for those increases in potential budget and things of that nature. Anybody from Eastern Michigan, go find Scott Weatherby. He was involved with me at Mississippi State in making the decision to do that initial push for a larger purchase of footwear. And even, I mean, obviously most of the administrators are not equipment people, so they're not really going to understand the nuances, but when you put the price tags in front of them, they understand money. So that's going to be my biggest suggestion.
Thanks for sharing that, Daniel. Kayla, Melinda, we'll kick this last topic question to you guys to get started. What have you found to be the most challenging aspect of handling track and field equipment, and what have you done to kind of combat that challenge?
I think for me, like I kind of said, is the footwear. We did put a clause in our agreement with UA and just saying, we for cross country, we have to use other brands, and they agreed to that even in some of their event shoes, and that even is on competition day. We just have to see if any of them's on the podium, we have to have them in an Under Armour shoe. So other than that, MUA fit. If I go back to I feel like every year we get it lined out, and the next year UA changed the cut of how they produce things. And so it creates a lot of trouble for me with my track athletes and just trying to get them in something that fits them properly. I feel like every time we get it figured out, something changes and I don't know why. But yeah, those are mostly my challenges. And then just kind of as an equipment manager, not being on site, not seeing these athletes every day, not issuing to them, not understanding their needs. You know, I'm here obviously, and they understand that we have a great relationship, but not having that daily interaction is really difficult as an equipment manager to make sure that I'm on top of their needs and the changes and how, you know, I'm just kind of disconnected from that staff a little. And so that's the challenges that I face. But the way I've fixed it is just having a really good relationship with coaches and staying in constant contact with them so that they know how to inform me when there's issues, things that we need, and they don't wait till the last second. And I think that's huge as an equipment manager is a lot of people wait and everything's an emergency. I kind of had that when I first came to CSU, and they were not very happy with how things were handled in their equipment. And I just said, basically, for me to be successful, you have to prepare me for what you need and not create an emergency situation, because we can't fix things that we can't control. And if you can't get inventory and you can't like get your hands on things, like I can't fix your problem. And so I think they understood that. Yeah, so I think from my side, that's more of the challenges I have.
Thank you for sharing. Kayla?
I kind of agree with Melinda. The shoe situation is really hard to go into, as well as knowing your athletes. Like if you have a track and field team, you obviously have very different groups of athletes. The cross country athletes are very different than the sprint athletes, who are very different from the throwers, who are very different than the jumps. And they all like different things, and they all like to wear different things when they compete. And so just kind of keeping that in mind, that I can't expect everybody to be in the exact same thing, because they are all doing different jobs and they don't all like to wear the same things. Like the throwers don't want to wear spandex. They don't want to do that. For the most part, our cross country kids didn't want to do anything other than wear split shorts. And then just kind of knowing the audience and knowing who wants what helps me a lot as far as budgeting for shoes went. If I know there's only 5 people on my team of 120 that are going to wear spandex, I'm not going to buy 120 spandex. And then I can just kind of shift the money over. And that came from like me being very hands-on with the athletes. I always made a point to get to practices, make sure I'm talking to the athletes. Hey, what do you like? Hey, what don't you like? Just so I can kind of advocate for them to the coaches, because the coaches each have their own group. So they don't know, like the throwing coach doesn't know that the cross country kids want this, and the cross country coach doesn't know that the sprinters want this. So just having those conversations with the athletes and being able to go to the coaches and be like, hey, I talked to athletes in each group. This is what they said would be more helpful. This is what they would like more than this. And it kind of opened the coach's eyes a little bit to realize like, hey, my group isn't the only group that's getting everything that I'm advocating for. And maybe there's a better use of our funds and things like that. So just kind of being able to balance all of the different groups of athletes and being able to talk to the coaches about it is probably what I had the most issue with. But as long as I was able to actually be around the athletes and help them, then it seemed to work out.
I think one of the biggest struggles that I had, it was kind of all encompassing. It was a shift in the roster makeup. Obviously, rosters on track teams can grow, they can shrink. There are some universities across the NCAA that have 100 easy for just one gender, and then you multiply that. We would see a lot of different shifts in what our coaching staff was aiming to score points in, both at the conference level and at the national level. And so that forces different equipment needs upon you before you even have a time to realize it. At one point, we were shifting our focus on to our throws area, and that forced a situation where we understood that, hey, we don't have necessarily all the types of implements that we need. And then that can get very pricey, as there's only a few companies in the world that sell specific types of product like that. And because they have no competition, they can kind of set the pricing at whatever they need to. So when you're going from having javelin throwers who are throwing 60 meters and your inventory is fine, and then you recruit two that can throw 80 meters, it sends your budget into a tailspin of, okay, I don't have enough javelins for these guys to throw at the level that they're capable of throwing. And so you have to make those big purchases, and that takes thousands of dollars away from you before you even have a chance to really react to it. And same thing if you shift over into having a bunch of hurdlers. It's, hey, do I have enough hurdles? Do I have enough that are working properly? And then you start getting guys who are breaking through hurdles because they can't get their lead leg up. Do you have enough boards to replace all those things? If you start developing a lot of jumpers, do you have enough long jump boards that you can take out ones that the plywood's just been destroyed on it? So it was always the roster makeup and what that looked like. Once you get into a situation where you have a lot of distance runners, then it becomes more footwear. Then anybody who deals with it knows the nuances of what track athletes like to wear. And that's all of it comes down to conversations with both the athletes and the coaching staff, and definitely making sure anything that is a real necessity in their eyes is addressed. And if they need to make concessions, just having the honest conversation of, hey, does everybody really need 2 pairs of long tights? I mean, is that really necessary? When if you look at the sport, even in the coldest weather, even at Wyoming, they're not wearing a bunch of long tights. They're still going with short tights. So being realistic about what your needs are, and paying attention to the roster and what the shifting demands are, that was always a big struggle.
Go ahead, Mark.
So mine's kind of twofold. I mean, obviously the footwear is a thing, right? And Daniel kind of touched on it, like the roster makeup. It's hard to do my large booking order, and it still seems so guesstimating is the best I can do. Like, I don't know my confirmed roster sometimes until like August. And we're carrying it like close to 120 people this year. So just the sheer number alone makes it challenging and forecasting for that. And then the second part of that is it's one team, right? That we call it track and field, but really it's kind of broken up into 6 teams within that team. And then 6 styles of running, and then 6 personalities within track, and then 6 kind of staffs of their own that blend into one staff. So I think that's just the interesting aspect of track and field. I think I've kind of slowly gotten to the point where I can work with the coaches and understand different personalities within different positions. But that's definitely a challenge, and you can't think of it, like Kayla said, as everyone's going to be in the same stuff because they're doing different things. So it makes sense, but there's a lot to unpack with that.
Linda, Kayla, Daniel, Mark, thank you for your time today, and thank you for sharing your experience. Before we hop off, does anybody have any questions they want to ask the panelists, or does anybody have anything that you want to add that you have found in your experience that has worked for you, that you think goes well with the topics of conversation that we've discussed today? If anybody has anything they want to share or ask, open the floor up to you now to do so, please.
Yeah, I have a question for anybody, either the panelists or just in general, who's with a Nike school. Are you guys working, or have ordered, or are issuing the next %, whether it's the Alpha Fly or the Vapor Fly? If you have ordered it or planning to order, how do you guys handle that issue? Because it's been causing a lot of headaches, and I just want to throw them out the window.
At University of Oregon, we order a lot of those. We typically look for the guys that are like our ringers, so like the top of the top, and typically just depends. You know, you get a list from the coach, like what a lot of the panelists have been saying on here. And that's the biggest thing. It's just making sure you have a list of the kids that are most likely going to be needing those. And usually it's the coach who will give us those. And yeah, I mean, they're really expensive, but they're perfect for when they're running a lot of miles. And another thing I kind of use is we issue them 2 shoes at a time. So it's kind of like tires, is like, if they're going to be running in 1 pair of shoes for like 2 weeks, you might as well give them 2 so they can alternate them each day, meaning that they're going to be wearing them out at the same time, making it longer. Does that make sense? But yeah, as far as alpha flies and next percents, we use a lot of them, but it just depends. You know, if it's a freshman and they just were on the team and they're not the best, right? Like it kind of comes down to the coach and our discretion and, you know, budgeting and yada, yada. Does that kind of help?
Yeah. I mean, my coach next year, he wanted everybody to be in a pair, which is fine. Right. I told him, we'll just budget for it. It means they'll get, it's LA. We don't need winter clothing. 1 set of sweats is all we need. By then it'll be year 3 with Nike and they'll have enough built up clothing, apparel wise, but it's just we still haven't gotten ours from the holiday window yet. And I've got kids that are like, I need them. Well, no, you don't need them. You want them. And they think I'm holding out on them. And it's caused a lot of headaches. I was just curious, but I didn't do them in the holiday window for next year. I put them in our booking order so they won't get the 3s. They'll get the next percent 2s again, and we'll have them in the fall so they don't harass me all fall semester.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we can talk more about it also off of this if it's a very specific. But I was just just curious how everybody handles it, because these kids, that's all they want. They need them. I need these. I can't train without them over winter break.
Yeah, and I think like it's really kind of deciphering, like, you know, which of those kids are the ones who are actually, you know, hitting 100 miles a week, and which are the ones that are seeing those kids get it and just want it because, you know, everyone has it, right? And so it's kind of like that, you know, in every sport, right? There's levels to it, and you have to really understand that the kids that are putting in 100 miles a week, yeah, they definitely do need them. But then the kids that are just on the team and run, you know, 20 miles a week, you know, and we're talking strictly distance here with those, you know what I mean? And I think that's important to note too, is like, you don't have to get alpha flies for, you know, the throwers and stuff like it. It's really just like broken down into each category. Right. And so it's, you know, like everyone's been saying on here.
Yeah. Thanks.
Gabe, you mentioned you give them 2 pair. Is it you just giving the distance runners 2 pair, or are you giving every athlete 2 pair? Like, are you giving your throwers 2 pair of throwing shoes?
So basically with my distance kids, we give them 2 pairs at a time, meaning that that doesn't mean that it's only 2 pairs for the whole year. It's when they come up and ask for new shoes after they've, you know, exhausted their shoes. It helps with us because when we issue 2 shoes, it's not like they're running that one, they're running both the pairs each. You know, you get what I'm saying? So Monday, I'm going to use my first pair, and then Tuesday, I'm going to wear my other pair. So you're wearing them out at the same time. That way, when you reissue them a new pair of shoes, it's not like you're going from a completely beat to crap shoe to a brand new shoe. You're wearing it down, and it's easier on the athlete's foot, meaning that they're not going from something that is completely beat up to something brand new. It's a gradual descent into a, you know what I mean? They're gradually wearing these shoes out at the same time, which is huge because not only does it last longer, but it works better for the athletes. And, you know, they appreciate having 2 shoes, especially, you know, where we are geographically, we get a lot of water. And so, you know, you run a full day, your shoes are going to be wet. And so you have a dry pair for the next day. You know what I mean? So it works out really well that way for us, at least.
Thanks for sharing, Gabe.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any additional questions they want to ask? if not, in closing, as always, I see Madam President Melly Resendez is on the call. Would you like to take the floor? And if you have anything you would like to share to everybody on the call?
First off, I hope everyone had a very lovely Thanksgiving, and looking forward to this holiday season upcoming. I hope everyone gets a chance to slow down a little bit, take a breath. I love this panel. I think you all did a wonderful job. And I love seeing Mark again. You know, just makes his beard, to be honest, I miss the beard. But anyway, I think you all did a wonderful job. Just want to give you a quick update on things coming up. We've got, getting a lot of correspondence in the near future. The strategic plan that I've put together will be coming out soon. You'll be getting some correspondence from the national board. So I'm looking forward to communicating with all of you as an association in the very near future. But what I'm really most excited about is this new convention coming up in Oklahoma City. We've got some things in the works that are going to be really cool, that we've never done, that are going to be exciting, and I'm excited about it. And I'm not super excitable. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope everyone has a good time. I can't wait to share with you guys. I'm keeping it a secret because it's going to be pretty cool. But really look forward to the next Zoom. I love our time on here, and I love learning. And go Cats.
Thanks, Melly. Thanks for hopping on there. Love your excitement. Love the passion you bring to the association and your leadership. So thank you so much. And Melinda, Kayla, Daniel, Mark, thanks for being the panel today and sharing your expertise. This has been, I thought today's call was one of the better ones we've had. A lot of very useful information in this. Gabe, thank you for hopping in there and giving your expertise as well. If anybody has any ideas for what we can do on future calls, any suggestions or concerns or questions, critique, please email me or Katie Wimp and let us know what you have. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season coming up. Hopefully everybody gets some rest, and thank you for all you do. See ya.